Hi YouTube, my name is Ivana, and the channel that I'm doing this on is a fairly new channel. I'm mostly just doing little videos about my son, but since this week is World Breastfeeding Week, I wanted to post a little video about that since I am breastfeeding my son. He is 6 months old. You can see him in other videos on my channel. His name is Liam. I just was looking through this book, The Womanly Art of Breastfeeding. It is a La Leche League book, and there was a little excerpt in the very beginning of the book that I thought was very fascinating and interesting, and a different way to look at breastfeeding that really hadn't been presented before, and like breastfeeding versus formula feeding, and how technically breast isn't best. So I'll just read like a little part of it just to kind of give you guys an idea of what this says and how breastfeeding isn't necessarily best. Okay, it says, how reliable is breastfeeding research? You've probably heard that breastfeeding reduces the risk of infections and a bunch of childhood and adult illnesses and diseases, that it reduces the risk of allergy, and that it even raises IQ, but none of it is true. And this is why. They basically want to use an example, and it says, Let's say we're testing a new drug. We focus on the people who get the drug with a group of ordinary people to compare them with. That's how we know what the drug did. It made things better or worse than normal. Accurate science focuses on the experiment, not the normal thing. Now, think about most of the research on breastfeeding. It's research on breastfeeding. Breastfeeding is what's normal. So that means that all of our recent research was done backwards. It was evaluating what was normal, breastfeeding, instead of evaluating what the experiment is, which is, in a sense, formula. It makes the high rates of formula-fed illness seem like normal baby health, and breastfeeding seem like bonus points. Breastfeeding doesn't reduce the risk of infection, illness, and disease. It doesn't add IQ points. Breastfeeding results in normal, good health and normal IQ. When babies aren't breastfed, and this is using the same information from the same studies, just shifting the focus to the true experimental group. When babies aren't breastfed, they are at an increased risk for all those short-term and long-term illnesses. Researchers have inadvertently hidden formula problems from us by focusing on the apparent fabulous benefits of human milk and breastfeeding, almost as if breastfeeding is a nice but unnecessary extra. So, as you can see, breast isn't best. It's what's normal. So that means that, you know, if you're formula feeding your child, you're giving them what's less than normal, and you're putting them at an increased risk for diseases and other illnesses, because breastfeeding what's normal. So a breastfed child is a normal, healthy child, not necessarily better or healthier than a formula-fed. A formula-fed baby is actually less healthy than a breastfed infant. Now, I'm not trying to bash formula in any way, because my first child, my daughter, was primarily formula-fed due to lack of support. But I'm so glad to have this World Breastfeeding Week to raise awareness, because I am now very pro-breastfeeding. I'm what you would call a lactivist. I hope to encourage all moms to breastfeed and give their baby what's the normal food, what's meant to be fed to their babies. I plan to breastfeed my son until he's, at least 2 years, because that's what the World Health Organization and the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends, that you breastfeed for at least 2 years. So that's my goal. And I know people might look at me weird, and I have family members who think it's weird, but, it's, what's normal for my child. The worldwide age of weaning, average age of weaning, is 4 years old. Do I plan to nurse my son to 4? I don't know. We'll see when we get to that point. But I definitely think that in this country we do have a big problem with breastfeeding, and it's really sad because, as this shows, it's what's normal, and when you're formula feeding your baby, you're kind of putting them at less than normal. You're making them at less than normal health, like on purpose. So, I'm not bashing the moms who have to formula feed. There are instances when you do have to formula feed, and I totally understand, but, I do take issue with some of the moms who willingly choose to formula feed and don't give breastfeeding a try, and that's really just disheartening, because it's so good for our babies, and it's what they're meant to have, and it's good for the moms as well. I personally love breastfeeding, and it is hard, and there are hard times, but I think with with things like World Breastfeeding Week, we can, you know, raise better awareness, and hopefully our breastfeeding rates in this country will increase. So, yeah, I just thought I'd point that out because I thought it was very interesting, because most people don't think to look at breastfeeding that way. They think it's best and it's better and everything else, when it's actually not. It's what's considered normal, and formula is less than normal. So I just thought I'd point that out, and hopefully that kind of gave a different insight on some of you breastfeeding moms. But yeah, so happy World Breastfeeding Week, and I hope all you moms are breastfeeding your babies. Bye, YouTube.